Hi everyone. Welcome to Reimagining Governance, a conversation on how creative practitioners are reorganizing the governance of our organizations, boroughs and cities. This event is part of Freelance Futures, a summer program of learning and action for equitable conditions in culture. My name is Joon-Lynn Goh, and I'm a cultural organizer with Migrants in Culture and What Next. I am a Southeast Asian woman with long black hair and a blunt fringe in a white top that says, "Fear is useless," against a honey-painted wall. So I'm here today with incredible practitioners whose practices I am deeply inspired by today and into tomorrow and their full potential. Jack Kee Tan, Marina Norris, and Arman Nouri. Before we start, I'll outline some access and other important information. This session is being recorded and will be permanently available to view on our dedicated YouTube channel or via the website or community platform. Today, we have My Clear Text providing live captioning. To access this, please click the CC Closed Captions button. And I'll just take a brief pause while those who need to activate captioning can do that. And interpreters of Color Network are providing our BSL interpretation services today. We are joined by the fantastic Rachel Jones, who is pinned onto the screen as well as the speakers. So Freelance Futures is a call for collective learning and action to build equitable conditions for freelancers working in culture. We believe that it will take all our efforts to affect real change. So we welcome all your insights and experiences as independent practitioners and practitioners working within cultural organizations, unions, funding bodies, and policy making. Given that we need all of us, this is our basic code of conduct for today. Please respect and value your collaborators in the room. Be aware of your privilege. Know when to make space and when to take space. Avoid overcomplicated language and explain technical terms. And realize we're all at different stages of learning. So respect the person, challenge the idea. This is a relaxed environment, so feel free to access this event in any way that makes participating work for you. If possible, please start with your video option switched on so that the speakers and contributors can see your lovely faces. If you've got a question or a point to raise today, use the raise hand function in the reaction tool or type the word question in capital letters in the chat function and we will come to you. So just to contextualize this conversation, part of Freelance Futures is tackling obstacles in our sector's status quo that prevent independent practitioners from choosing to enter or stay in the arts in a way that is sustainable and fulfilling. And another part of the program is about recognizing the existing leadership of independence and the undervalued or marginalized practices and solutions that need to be centered, amplified, and resourced by institutions and formalized structures of power and decision-making. So one area of existing leadership is how independents, creatives, artists, culture workers, and organizers are exploring and intervening into sites of governance, including the governance of our organizations, boroughs, and cities. So in the last month, I did an informal poll straw on people's attitudes to governance, and they kind of fell in three categories. One, people's eyes glazed over. That was category one. Category two, people who felt like they were unqualified to have an opinion. And the third category, which I think is everyone in this room here today, We've just recently found out that this is the top selling event as part of Freelance Futures. So 200 people registered for it. And it includes people like Arman, who when I spoke to him last week said, I am unashamedly excited about governance. So I encourage everyone to bring that geekiness and that passion into this space. And I guess the question is, why is there such a difference between these three people? Eyes that glaze over, people that feel they're unqualified to make decisions about where they live, and people who are really excited by the potential of governance. And I hope that in this conversation, we can all take back some learnings on how we can demystify what governance is and who gets to govern. We can make space to ask what happens if we start to treat governance as a creative medium in which we all, as stakeholders of an organization or residents of a locality, have the ability to shape our environments, and also how we can reflect on what we can learn from creative practice. So the practice of being outsiders, shapeshifters, dreamers, visionaries, who can meet the deeply colonial, ableist, and patriarchal forms of organizations and organizing that we've inherited with a creative and radical ethos. So the way that we're going to hold this space today is that each of the speakers is going to share and introduce their practice, and then we'll open up for a conversation and we'll close with a takeaway. So I've asked speakers to describe how they're approaching and influencing governance, what made them get involved in it, and what the purpose of governance is for them. But they were free to ignore those prompts as well. So we're going to start with Jackie Tan, followed by Marina Norris, and then Arman Nouri. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Tan. I'm from Singapore. I am a Chinese man, a person of Chinese descent, a man with very short hair, glasses, and I'm sitting in my studio in Southwest Scotland. I'm an artist who works within the field of art and law mainly, but in the last couple of years have been looking at law as governance. So working with art projects to do with governance as well. In the last year also, I have been working within the field of what looks like consultancy to a lot of people, but to me, it's just more social practice artwork. So a lot of people might engage me as a consultant, but then I will say to them, let's make art together, instead of me telling you as if I was an expert, which I'm not. So without further ado, I would just basically therefore like to share with you 4 works of art that I think are relevant to this conversation. And I'm going to share my screen to do that. So hopefully you can see the screen. And so I'm going to
I know, Jack, I think the internet reception is a bit slow.
show you this
Yeah. So I'm wondering if maybe we should go to Marina, and then if Nyasha, you can speak with Jack to just make sure his Wi-Fi is nice and strong for us. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Marina. I'm a white woman I'm middle-aged. I'm wearing a white t-shirt. I have gold necklaces and gold earrings and red lipstick. And I'm in a powder pink, apparently it's a powder pink background that I am sitting in front of. And I am in sound rooms today in Brighton. This is part of Create Music, who are our music service in the city. My work, and Joon-Lynn and I have talked about this title, creative practitioner, because I'm not an artist. And I loved what Jackie Tan said about consultancy, because apparently people might perceive that's what I do, but I like to think that what I do is work with organisations and individuals to solve problems and build on opportunities. And I also do interim leadership roles with organisations. And today, I'm really excited to hear from my fellow colleagues and those online. I am a governance geek, but today I'm going to be talking about Brighton Hove's ABCD Cultural Recovery Plan. And I guess my journey on that, it's a collective journey with many other people. And I want to talk about this plan. It started 2 years ago, in March 2020. And subsequent to then in Brighton, we have come together and raised over 530,000 together, delivered 11 projects, generated 25 new commissions, 24 events, 48 workshops, and thousands of people have been involved. And I just want to say right now, we absolutely did not set out in 2020 to establish any entity of governance in Brighton and Hove around I'm going to unmute. Great. We did not set out to establish any governance structure, but I want to tell the story, which is how we ended up in a point where we needed to create a governance structure and some of the learning from that structure and some of the tensions that I think have existed. In March 2020, we came together as individuals across the city in different ways. I was co-chair of What Next with Louise Blackwell, and we started organising meetings. Unknown to us, other colleagues who worked in commercial production came together to organise meetings under the banner of EPIC. And there was also the cultural commission that existed, which was the council's group of organisations that it worked with on cultural strategy in the city. And Andrew Comben, who is the director of Brighton of the Cultural Commission, and who is also director of Brighton Dome and Festival, realised that these meetings were happening in different networks and brought us together. We were all in shock, weren't we, 2 years ago? And in Brighton and Hove, the shock and extent of the impact on culture is significant, because 30% of our economy is from live events. And in 2019, over £1.5 billion was generated in annual turnover from the creative and cultural industries. So there are thousands of us that work in culture and creative industries in this city. And we recognized that in these networks that people were coming together, that actually something quite unusual was happening that hadn't necessarily happened before. Whilst we were all being helpful to one another in terms of the networks and what we were doing, there was also the first time that people in the city, the different organizations and freelancers, were in the same space. And we were talking about what we needed to do next. And there was a capacity to listen and to respect the views of others, because everybody was experiencing, this shock. There was an energy in that space, I suppose, fear, hope, confusion, anger. But what we did know is that we had the opportunity to collectively work together to find a way through this. So we were grateful when Arts Council gave us some money to support a process where we could have a collective dialogue. So over 2 weeks, in September 2020, we brought together 100 creatives to look at what they wanted to talk about and what they wanted to do moving forward for culture in the city. What did we need to do? How did we support? How could we support each other? It resulted in this ABCD plan, which had 5 strands of work, and there were several projects that, as I said, a huge amount of projects came out of this. But what I want to talk about is when the plan was produced, we were absolutely not short of ambition. It was very clear. We had huge ambition. It was about what we could do now, but it was also about what we could do in the future. And if we were going to realise that ambition, we needed to fundraise. And it was at this point that we realised that we were advised, we realised there's a lot of conversation that we probably needed a governance structure to make this happen. We talked about legal structures, setting up separate organisations, and we said, why create an organisation when everybody else, all the organisations are struggling? We talked about whether one lead organisation can take ownership of this process, and we realised that was potentially politically divisive and wouldn't necessarily be the best way forward. So we decided that we would look at we decided on developing a governance framework that would not only be accountable for any money we raised for the delivery of the projects, but that also instilled and carried on the values and behaviours that we had established working collectively, that respected organisations and freelancers equally alongside one another. And we wanted the governance model to essentially model and enable those values to flourish moving forward. And we wanted decision-making that resulted from a range of relevant voices around the table. I suppose we looked at a phrase that came up in governance today. Somebody mentioned it along the way, I'll say it, which is good governance will support management, staff and stakeholders to be the best they can be. We wanted everybody to be the best they could be on this journey. We created the governance structure where there were openly advertised places to go onto this structure. We paid freelancers for their time to be a part of the governance structure, and we recruited 2 chairs. One was the Deputy Director for Culture in the Council, and one was the Dean for Humanities and Media and Arts in the University of Sussex. And the governance structure has been running for 15 months. Next door, there are 70 people in sound rooms. There are 70 people who have come together to talk about what we do next with the plan, but also what we do next with this governance structure. Do we need this at this point? Do we evolve it? What does it look like? My own view is that we should evolve the governance structure. I think the moment we created it, we could feel that there was a formalization and a kind of tension that existed in that formalization. And that actually we need to be able to let go of that and adapt to the needs of the moment and what the city needs in terms of any accountable body for projects moving forward. I think that governance, and my own view is sometimes, and I think where we didn't work well in our governance journey was where we undertook performative competence. And this is a phrase that artist Marcelo Sanchez shared with me recently. It's the idea that we are performing competence in meetings to make ourselves, make it okay. We're showing that everything was okay. The best governance meetings we had was when we said, actually, these are the issues that we're having. This is the question, the problem I've got. How can we share accountability for that issue and problem? It was not having meetings separately out of the governance room. Maybe because I'm a freelancer, but I'm not drawn to long-term relationships with fixed structures. I think we thrive when we can evolve. when work can evolve, and we create structures that suit the situation and the need at the time. I think that governance sometimes is too rigid and formal, and that association with formality means that there's a fixed way of working. Time is the enemy of meaningful governance, as is formality. We have a 2-hour governance meeting, and that is what we will always have. Maybe we only need a 30 minutes meeting or something. Maybe we need longer, but we need meaningful discussions in those spaces. These structures are not inclusive. They're often they suit linear thinking, and they end up in formalized spaces, which often can create hierarchies in themselves. So my own view is around governance is to be accountable. We need to share challenges and find structure. We need to find ways in which we can be accountable and find forms that work around accountability, rather than create formal structures that we must maintain forever. This process started with the coalition of the willing. It had no assigned authority at the start, but the influence was created because we came together, not because we had a formal structure. The power is not in the structure, but in collective action. I'm going to leave it there. I haven't talked about funders, and I think there's a need. I'm interested to hear from my colleagues about, the driver often is what funders want rather than what's right for the project. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you, Marina. I think we may have Jack back. Do we see Jack?
Hi.
Hi, Jack.
Hi. Can you hear me? Am I back?
So I think because your internet's not the strongest today, I'm trying to see if we can share your screen from maybe my account.
Yep.
Ricardo or Nyasha, can you make me a co-host, or is that possible so I can share Jack's screen? Oop, here we go. So, sorry, I now need to find, oh. I'm looking for how to share the screen. It should be on my right-hand button, but I can't see it. Yeah, I don't seem to be able to do it. So maybe Ricardo, you can do it.
Okay, Joon-Lynn, do you have the link for the presentation? Please.
Yes. I'm just going to send it to you now.
So maybe while you're doing that, I can just start talking really about what I started talking, but went off.
Thank you.
So the project that I was talking about before I disappeared was called Global Ethnic Majorities Board Association. Could you scroll down to the bottom of that and just click the link, Global Ethnic Majority Board Association? So this is basically an association that meets quarterly, made of global majority board members who are serving in arts organizations at the moment. And this came up out of a discussion between Jade Montserrat, Amy Lawrence, and myself, where we identified, all three of us have worked on boards. And when we realized that, we started sharing various experiences of being global majority people sitting on sometimes all white boards, or definitely majority white boards. So I think we decided that it would be really great to just offer this opportunity where we can all gather together for people who want to just share experiences about what it means to think about an anti-racist approach to governance itself, whether we can support each other, whether we can share knowledge, and how through this forum we can also feed back to our boards on how being a global majority person, what our perspectives are, and how it affects board meetings. So yeah, so that's an ongoing work that is really about trying to enrich the kind of enrich the kind of ecosystem of trusteeship, I suppose, in the country. I mean, we're trying to do that. So the next project I would share with you, upper level, is called RPG Longsight. So if you could go to that link, please. So if you go down, if you go back up to the previous, keep going up. Oh, sorry, go down. Yeah, go down and then click on RPG Longsight. So RPG Longsight is a year-long, sorry, somebody wants to I'm just going to put the link in there for people who want to go directly to it rather than looking online. Okay, so RPG Longsight is a year-long experiment in governance that is just started actually this month. Longsight is a community in South East Manchester, and it is a brand new arts organization that has funding to do a pilot year-long program, at the end of which they have to decide to incorporate, basically. So they've got just sort of some seed money to just start the project up. The end of the year, they've got to incorporate. So they're running a whole year of exhibitions, public programming, education programs. What they've asked me to do is to come in and help them think through what governance models would be ideal for them at the end of the year when they need to actually incorporate. What I proposed to do for Longsight Art Space is that over the coming year, we will role play 4 different models of governance for them. So while they are delivering their program, they will deliver their program in 4 different hats. So Q1, we're going to be a single tier foundation model charity. Then in Q2, we will become a 2-tier association model charity. In Q3, we will then transform into a CIC. And then in Q4, we will deliver the year's program as a co-op. And basically, we're just trying on for size these 4 different governance models so that by the end, they will be able to decide which they want. But I'm hoping that we can be much more creative about this, and we will be able to maybe tailor-make a governance model that actually fits what they're trying to do. So really, this is about trying out the 4 governance models, trying it out with the community as well, because the community will also role play as trustees, then they will role play as members, customers with a loyalty card, and then they will role play as co-owners in the co-op. So everybody's wearing different hats, and at the end of this, we will decide which is the best one, or maybe we will tailor make something that's a bit of everything and incorporate in that way as well. I think the last project that I want to share with you is a project called Devising Governance. If you go all the way down again to the original post. Yep, keep going down. And then it's called Devising Governance. So Devising Governance is a project where I am working with the Scottish Sculpture Workshop, which is an organisation that provides making facilities for artists and for the public. So they have blacksmithing facilities. You can go and learn bronze casting. You can go and learn ceramics and woodworking. And they are part of a 3-year program of looking at, shall we say, radical administration. And what I'm doing with them is trying to devise policy for the organization via their own embodied practice. So this is a kind of experiment where I'm exploring the idea that governance can come out of existing practices of an organization. So this is a sculpture organization. So my question was, can we come up with policy that comes from sculpture rather than from, I don't know, management studies, right? Because it's a way of creating policy that's more true to the actual performance of the organization. So the project will happen over 3 weekends, where we will try making governance from blacksmithing, making governance from bronze casting, and making policies from ceramics. The idea here, for example, in blacksmithing, I'll give you an example. So what will happen is that people will, a group of stakeholders will come for the weekend and learn learn blacksmithing. But while they're in the forge, they will be running from the forge to the boardroom. And in the boardroom, we will be looking at the organization's operations policies. So you will see them like running from, you know, working metal to discussing policy. And the idea is that hopefully these 2 ways of thinking merge. I suppose most logically, for example, is in blacksmithing, what we do is that we take a piece of metal, we heat it up, we create the right conditions for it to become malleable and to be molded into a shape. So we could, for example, be looking at human resources policy or training policies, where we are also looking at people and asking what are the right conditions in which we can mold or shape somebody's knowledge or who they want to be and help them along and create the perfect conditions where they can transform the way that the material is transformed. And if you click, could you click that link that says blacksmithing governance? That blue, yeah, that's right. So basically at the end of the first weekend, which we've already done, the blacksmithing weekend, we talked about all the different kinds of blacksmithing techniques that could have happened, that did happen. And everybody really loved the idea of twisting metal. And so we thought, oh, what would happen if we took this idea of the twist technique in blacksmithing and applied it to the organization, and we asked the organization, could you for one day twist and exchange roles with somebody so that it would be almost like the organization twists. So at the end of every weekend, we create this thing called a performance score. We instruct the organization on doing something, on trying something. And we are in the middle now of getting some feedback. The organization gets about 3 months to try this out. And so they have tried it out, and they're going to be getting back to us on how they fared with swapping jobs or swapping roles for a day. And seeing what happens. So that's my work. And I suppose I would just, to answer Joon-Lynn's questions, the reason why I do this work is because I feel that governance is social justice. The work of doing governance is the same for me as the work of doing social justice, because organizations run the world. Organizations create reality, and it is through governance and policies that the organizations know what to do. So for me, there is a kind of bureaucratic activism that I'm interested in here. And I feel like if we can change what happens in the boardroom, we change what happens in the world. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Jack. Passing on to Arman as our last speaker.
Wow, Jack, I'm in awe. Not only awe, but you've also answered all the questions I had in the next 10 minutes. So I'm not too sure
where to take this. But yeah, thank you so much, Marina and Jack and Joon-Lynn as well for the opening part of this event. Hi everyone, my name is Arman Nouri. I'm a man with Iranian heritage, with dark hair on my head and face, wearing an orange shirt, and there's a white background behind me. I'm a cultural worker with an interest in space, power, and cities, and the ability of art and culture and moving us towards the socially just world. And I pursue projects and ideas across a variety of scales, spaces, and sectors, including public, culture, and built environment. And today I'm here to talk through two aspects of my practice. Firstly, my work with the Mayor of London's Culture and Community Spaces at Risk programme. And secondly, my work as co-founder, co-director of Kin Structures. And both of those works are invested in achieving spatial justice, albeit with different approaches and tools. And what I hope will be made clear is that the practice and destination of spatial justice is impossible without good governance, as Jack so beautifully just illuminated as well. So firstly, culture and community spaces at risk. So we began in 2016 as the Culture at Risk Office, which provided support to cultural spaces that were at risk of being lost. And for the first few years of its life, it was focusing on cultural spaces such as artist studios, LGBTQ plus nighttime spaces, nightclubs, but also on independent cinemas, theatres, and all sort of other spaces that you will be very familiar with in your own cities and villages. In 2020, as a result of the pandemic, the focus of the programme expanded to also look at community spaces. So in addition to the culture space I just talked about, we added spaces like youth clubs, community centres, adventure playgrounds, community gardens. So a much broader concoction of spaces which host and enrich community and cultural life in the city. And I think even more importantly than the expansion perhaps is applying a much stricter equity lens on these issues across the city. So really thinking through equity, race, class in relation to these asset-based issues. Now, in terms of the risk factors, we have external and internal issues to these organisations. So external are things like high land prices, threat of redevelopment, complex planning system. Internally, we have issues around capacity, organisational knowledge, comms and marketing comes up as a big risk factor as well. And actually what we're finding is that governance is what underpins a lot of these internal issues. And there's some work that we're developing at the moment, some research is going to be published in the next couple of months, looking at the barriers that underrepresented groups face when accessing, owning and operating space. And one of the key insights that's emerging from that is that, yes, governance really is underpinning a lot of this, especially the kind of internal organizational dynamics that we're seeing. And of course, governance isn't a single issue conversation. It is quite literally a systemic question. So by that, I mean, when we're talking about good governance or bad governance, we are referring to good or bad systems that have multivarious routes, outputs, and outcomes. So, for example, in one case that we've been involved in, we know that bad governance is there, and we know that it looks like routes, out-of-date policy agenda, a complex geography and community, historically bad relations with the local authority. We know that's manifesting the outputs of that, let's say, are too little correspondence and communication between stakeholders, an unrepresentative steering group. And the outcome of that is that there is a fraught regeneration process, perceptions of tokenistic engagement, and relations between the local community and institutional stakeholders remains fractious. So what we see here in just one case is bad governance situated across scales, across time periods, and also across stakeholders and their respective agendas. And in this situation as the GLA, we are convening, mediating, advising, assuring, facilitating. But I think what is interesting here is that City Hall is doing all of this very much on the ground, at eye level with culture and community organisations affected by this bad governance situation. In fact, asked by them specifically to help them in this bad governance situation, rather than invited by institutional stakeholders who are also kind of part of the problem, let's say. And maybe something which we can discuss later is whether that position that we have adopted very intentionally through the Culture and Community Space of Risk programme is one that public sector institutions need to do more of. Then the next part of my week is kin structures. So we are an arts organisation that's exploring new approaches to building and sustaining culture and community infrastructure. And at the moment, we are working on an estate in Lewisham, the Orchard Gardens estate, delivering a 9-month programme of art and culture that is really set on encouraging dialogue between residents, facilitating access to the estate's underused community centre, and ultimately trying to support residents to have stronger ownership over what happens on the estate and in the centre. And I think there's less to cite here in terms of concrete examples around governance, but I think it is helpful with this conversation to talk about this work, especially because of the closer proximity it has to arts practice than the GLA work. And in our thinking and work around community centres, specifically those underused and what we at Kin Structures call underloved, it has been made abundantly clear that the issue is one of bad governance. Specifically, poor institutional decision-making around community assets, aka how the institution that owns the space, let's say, is relating to that space, and then unfit for purpose rules constraining access and the type of activities that can take place in that community centre. So really how the community, the key audience, is then relating to that space. And we know this is a fact across the city. We have seen it play out in a variety of contexts across London, North London, South London, East London to, well, not yet in West London, so I won't call them out, but we are seeing this across the city. And in this context, we are not culture and community spaces at risk. We aren't the GLA. We do not have those tools at our disposal. We are a 2-person grassroots arts organisation. So what is our role? What is our capability? And we have turned to art as a means of opening conversations up about governance, platforming resident questions and concerns about existing arrangements, and trying to take that work to those who are currently making the decisions. And we're actively questioning, therefore, kind of what is the limit of artistic practice when it comes to questions of governance? Is there more, as Jack has shown already in his presentation? And I'd love to discuss that more in more detail with everyone on the call. And finally, just to conclude, I wanted to go to the question around the purpose of governance to me. And governance determines power, which determines everything. It's a really obvious point, but it's so important that it needs to be stated over and over and over again. So how we design and maintain our systems of governance is crucial. And if, like me, you want the world to be fairer, greener, more just, what are the governance systems that will enable that to take place? And I think it's an inherently multi-scalar or an interscalar, multifaceted question and answer. And I think an interesting sub-question to that, for me, something I've been thinking about a lot recently, is whether governance is the beginning or the midpoint in that solution. And are there things that need to be put in place for good governance to manifest? And here I'm thinking about questions of representation, inclusion, education, because I think we're so used to seeing and experiencing bad governance in so many aspects of our lives. We almost accept it without question or just shrug our shoulders and prioritize other aspects of the work. So actually, I think we all have a lot to unlearn before we can meaningfully enter a dialogue and enact good governance. And I'll leave it there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Arman, Jack, and Marina. It feels as though you've all highlighted how important governance is, that it is social justice, that it is about power, and either moving towards more progressive distributed futures or retaining the status quo. And each of you talked about the ways that you've intervened in particular sites, organizations, boroughs, and cities. And I think there was a question a bit earlier on, and I think everyone, when we're talking about how do we amplify and make more appealing or more accessible this experimental and creative ethos in governance, which is so important. What has worked? Why have certain organizations allowed you to come in? Or what did it take for you to build new governance structures or to repair old governance structures? I'm wondering if you could each, or someone, if you wanted to share about what has made it possible for you to do the work that you do, and how can more of us do this work?
I can start from my perspective. I guess again, it's twofold the answer, because I think I'm working in two very different contexts. I mean, with the organisations that we support through the programme, it's a very clear rationale, I guess, for that work, or kind of reason why they end up there is that they are at risk. You know, these are spaces that are at risk of being lost, and they come to us looking for support to help them move away from that situation. And when they do register, and when we do undertake initial conversations with them and enter into that dialogue, it's not as if governance is immediately labelled as the issue. It's not necessarily clear to them, it's not necessarily clear to us. And actually what I think is interesting is that we always take a variety of steps, and it almost takes a bit of time to get to us situating governance as the problem, because I think there's so many layers before and so many issues that arise from it that we kind of end up tackling those first and then get into governance maybe a little bit later on. But that's, I think, in terms of kind of understanding how we support and how we practice governance is very clear in that situation. That's really based around risk, and it's really about issues. So for me, that's why I think I've got such a direct experience of governance has to be a part of the solution, because in so many cases it is. I think with kin structures, I think we're very much at the beginning of that journey to understanding what governance looks like in relation to our work. I think we're really clear about our response, or the problem we are trying to respond to is one of governance or bad governance. I think we're really clear about that. But I think we're still very much at the beginning of figuring out our position towards it. And so I'm taking massive inspiration from what Marina and Jack were just talking about, because I think in terms of demonstrating the possibilities and opening up the scope for what governance looks like in these contexts, that's where we need to be headed towards.
Would anyone else like to respond to what are the conditions you need to do this work? What helps you to do this work, and how can more of us do this work?
Can I do a response? And there's also a question here from Alana, which I think connects as well on the chat box. I think it's about not seeing governance as a fixed structure. A governance is an ongoing process. And the problem with once you have kind of governance and boards is that that even though they evolve every few years, the actual way of working, the dynamic in those spaces is not discussed as a process and an ongoing piece of work. It's like they become stifled, like I say, in a kind of performative competence of everything's okay. So I think we've got to be able to start seeing governance as an ongoing process and adapting to what you need at the right, what any organisation, or in this case, it's a citywide plan needs. Alana asked about, it was a coalition of the willing and that the governance model worked around the people. But how can you make sure it's representative and a diverse group of people? And I want to talk about this because this is, in terms of what we learned, we worked really hard right at the beginning to ensure that inclusion and anti-racism was an inherent way of working within this process. And that meant working with different members of the community to build trust and to work together on the ideas that generated into the plan, When we got to the governance structure, though, when we got to openly advertising, it was really interesting how difficult it was then to get as many applications as we wanted from a diverse group of individuals. And I should say, though, that, you know, we are diverse, but not as diverse as we want to be. And I think it's because of this problem with formality and calling it even a governance structure, then actually what it was is it's a process. We want to be accountable for things. We used the word governance, and I think we alienated a group of people, a whole group of people. And I don't think people feel like they had a relationship with that word. And I don't think, and why would you if you've never done it before? And we didn't maybe talk enough about what we could do to support people on this journey. So whilst we were paying people, we didn't say, we're going to be open about the fact we're all learning together. You don't need to be an expert. None of us are. We've never been in a pandemic before. So I guess just a couple of reflections there, that and that's why I think we need to start thinking about governance as a process and rethinking language as well around it.
Yeah, I really love that, Marina, and I want to really kind of chime and just reinforce what you're saying. And I'm going to say, so this is controversial, but this is my view, right? Which is that governance is, I love governance, I actually love law, I love rules, but governance to me is inherently a patriarchal, heteronormative, colonialist and ableist object. What I mean by that is that governance, I think, was invented by, you know, upper class, straight, white, able-bodied people. I mean, governance was invented alongside the East India Company. I mean, this is where the heritage of governance is. It puts you, my opinion, it puts you in a position where there is this thing called being in charge, having to regulate, having to supervise, having to direct. Now, all these are hierarchical, top-down ways of being in the world. So even if you recruited a diverse board of, you know, disabled, queer, global majority people, they are forced into behaving in a way that is not who they are. This is why I quit quite a number of my boards, because as an artist who just wants to relate in a sort of messy, personal, empathetic way with people, suddenly I'm on a board 4 times a year doing this, basically, at people. And wow, I just thought I've just become that patriarchal person, and I don't want to be, but the law means that I have to. So I'm really keen on trying to reform governance from the inside by alluding to other cosmologies of governance, shall we say. By that I mean, there are other ways of doing governance that predate colonialism, because human societies exist. There are matriarchies, or, you know, indigenous knowledges, or other ways of gathering and making decisions, other ways of being accountable and being in relationship to each other that isn't colonial, neoliberal, patriarchal, whatever. But we just need to rediscover those. And I think that's what, that's the job in front of us, because we know that governance has failed. For me, it's like since the banking crisis in the late 2000s, for me, that's the one of the ultimate failures of governance. So that model, that cosmology, the Western cosmology of governance is, to me, already failed. And we need to invent new models that are based on different value systems. And I think the law allows us to do that. I honestly do.
Absolutely. And I know Arman and I have spoken about the term stewardship rather than governance, because the etymology of governance comes from exactly that, rule and authority, whereas stewardship is about an ecosystem and our place and our role within it. for future and past generations. We are rapidly running out of time of a conversation that could go on for many hours. And I think there's a lot of appetite in the room here. So I'm wondering if we can just do a round of your final thoughts, provocations, reflections for people to take away. And everyone, please do follow our brilliant speakers today and their work. So maybe just around final last words before we close.
Happy to go first. I think for me, where is bad governance happening in your life? Sourcing it, locating it, defining it, changing it, and what are the lessons you can take from that process? And how does that then inform your approach to instilling good governance in other contexts, whether it's professional or personal?
For me, I would just say, let's create a coalition of making governance or remaking governance together. We can bring a horse to water, but can't force it to drink, which means there are organizations and parts of society that just don't want to do this, but that's not going to stop us from doing it. And we need to create a kind of coalition or friendship group of governance reimaginers and carry on with the work.
I love this, Jack, and I just want to say that I think that as freelancers as well, with that, it is about finding each other and knowing that collectively we can make change. We can challenge what exists, but we can also create alternative offers ourselves. But I think it's difficult to do sometimes when you're alone and you don't feel like you're fitting into a system. So I love a friendship group of governance geeks where let's make one happen together, and let's steward collective ideas around cultural placemaking and organizations better together.
Thank you, everyone. To Marina Norris, to Arman Nouri, to Jackie Tan, to Rachel Jones, for this amazing conversation. There's 107 of us in the room, so I think the coalition can grow from here. This will be permanently recorded and available, so you can come back and listen again and follow all the speakers. And I look forward to seeing you in other events as part of Freelance Features. Thank you so much, everyone.